What if I told you that the trajectory of your entire day, your mood at 2 in the afternoon, your productivity at 4, even just your patience by dinner, was actually decided within the first 60 seconds of opening your eyes?
I mean, it really is the ultimate daily crossroad.
Right. We obsess over morning routines. We buy the planners, we download the apps, but we rarely look at the split-second psychology of our very first physical action.
Exactly. That very first decision, made when the brain is, barely functioning, it sets a trajectory that most of us are completely blind to.
Mm.
Until it's already noon and we're wondering why we feel so derailed.
Yeah, totally. So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive, where we are putting that exact trajectory under the microscope. Today, we are exploring the anatomy of morning routines.
It's a great topic.
It really is. And we are basing this on a remarkably detailed conversational source we have between two individuals who are simply comparing their start-of-day habits. The mission for this deep dive is to extract the hidden psychology and the biology, really behind how these seemingly simple choices dictate the momentum of our entire day.
From the way we negotiate with our alarm clocks, right down to the specific macronutrients we put on our breakfast plates.
Exactly.
And what makes this source material so compelling is that we're analyzing two contrasting yet totally complementary perspectives.
Right, so let's set the stage. On one side, we have an individual who wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning, aggressively eager to get a head start.
Uh-huh.
And on the other side, their conversational partner wakes up at 7 o'clock. But despite that 1 hour difference, they are completely unified by a shared love for the exact same thing.
The quiet, peaceful nature of the morning.
Yes. They both specifically point out that they love the morning because there is less noise. It gives them the mental space to think clearly.
But how they navigate that quiet and how they protect it is where the real differences show up.
Exactly. So I want you, listening right now, to think about your own morning today. Were you actually intentional with those first few waking moments, or were you just surviving until the caffeine finally kicked in?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at that very first physical transition.
The biological bridge between sleep and wakefulness.
Right. So for the 6 a.m. riser, the absolute very first thing they do is drink a glass of water. They note it immediately helps them feel awake.
Wow.
But meanwhile, the 7 a.m. riser's first action after getting out of bed is to immediately make the bed.
See, what's fascinating here is that these are two entirely different mechanisms for achieving the exact same goal.
Which is?
Signaling to the nervous system that the transition from rest to action is non-negotiable.
Let's push on that, though. If the human body waking up is like, say, a cold engine in a car, that glass of water isn't just fluid.
No, not at all.
It's the oil lubricating the gears. After 8 hours of sleep, your cells are literally dehydrated. They're sluggish.
Right, and hitting an empty stomach with cold water triggers the sympathetic nervous system. It's this biological shock that forces your metabolism to just snap to attention.
Exactly. But making the bed, which the 7 a.m. riser prioritizes, hold on, is that really a biological win, or is it just productive procrastination?
Wait, what do you mean?
Like, you're doing the easiest possible chore so you don't have to face the hard work of the actual day yet?
Ah, I see. Let me challenge that framing, actually. It might look like productive procrastination from the outside, but neurologically,
Yeah.
it is an immediate external structural win.
Okay, how so?
Well, when you are waking up, your limbic system, the emotional, comfort-seeking part of your brain, is basically screaming at you to get back under the covers.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. So by forcing yourself to make the bed, you are immediately engaging your executive function. You're overriding a biological impulse with a logical action.
Wow, so you are creating order in your physical environment the second your feet hit the floor.
Exactly. Which lowers cortisol and sets a tone of control for the rest of the day.
That makes a lot of sense. And what's fascinating here is the universal tension we see in the source between that kind of strict intention and our natural human resistance.
Oh, the resistance is real.
Very real. Because despite these very structured first steps, the metabolic shock of the water, the psychological boundary of the bed making, both of our sources admit to a shared, glaring vulnerability.
They both set their alarms.
Yes, but they both confess that sometimes they don't get up right away. They both hit the snooze button.
Ah, the dreaded 5 more minutes.
Yes. Even the 6 a.m. go-getter, The one who claims to want a head start on the day, right? Even they admit to wanting just 5 more minutes sometimes.
It's so relatable.
Yeah.
And both acknowledge that it's a habit they actively try to avoid. It highlights this deeply human desire to cling to the comfort of homeostasis.
Fighting against the discipline required to shatter that state.
Exactly. Sleep inertia is incredibly powerful. The brain waking up is not an instant flip of a switch. It's a slow clearance of sleep-inducing chemicals.
And the bed is just a safe, warm, tightly controlled environment.
Right. So reaching for that snooze button is the ultimate act of rebellion against the demands of the outside world.
I mean, think about your own hand reaching for that button in the dark. You know it's a bad idea, but the biological drive to stay unconscious is temporarily stronger than your rational mind.
Yeah, it really is.
But once they conquer that resistance, once the physical shock of waking up is overcome and they are up, brushing teeth, washing faces, taking their daily shower.
Getting dressed, which is a t-shirt and jeans for one, and simple, comfortable clothes for the other.
Right, the body is finally in sustained motion.
So you've jump-started the nervous system with that cold water or that quick win of making the bed. You've cleared the sleep inertia.
But the brain cannot run on dopamine, hydration, and willpower alone.
No, it immediately demands fuel to sustain this newly active state. Which brings us to the next critical decision.
Breakfast. The ritual of fueling up. And let's look at their specific choices because I noticed a massive contradiction in the 7 a.m. riser's routine.
Oh, what did you catch?
Well, the 6 a.m. riser relies on what I would call the reliable utility breakfast. Eggs and toast.
Simple and effective.
Right. They cook it themselves most of the time because, as they point out, eggs are very easy to cook. It's simple, delicious, gets the job done.
Okay.
But the 7 a.m. riser, they opt for cereal and fruit. Now, the 7 a.m. riser claims to love the calm and peace of the morning, yet they immediately hit themselves with a sugary cereal.
I see where you're going with this.
Isn't that biologically setting yourself up for chaos later in the day?
That is the exact physiological trade-off we need to examine, yeah. The 6 a.m. riser is consuming eggs that is a high-protein breakfast.
Right.
Protein creates a slow, sustained release of amino acids and stabilizes blood sugar. It gives them the steady cognitive momentum required to tackle a long day.
Makes sense.
But the 7 a.m. riser, choosing cereal and fruit, that is heavily carbohydrate-based, it causes a rapid glucose spike in the bloodstream.
Which provides instant accessible energy, but it often precedes a mid-morning crash.
Exactly.
Which perfectly explains their beverage choices. Here's where it gets really interesting. Look at how they medicate those breakfast choices with caffeine.
Oh, this is a great point.
The 6 a.m. riser, the one with the steady protein energy, drinks coffee. They acknowledge that coffee helps many people wake up, but the 7 a.m. riser drinks tea almost every morning.
Because the slow, sustained caffeine drip of tea is biologically necessary to manage the erratic energy spike of that cereal.
Yes. If we go back to our engine analogy, coffee is the blunt force on switch. You flood the system with cortisol and you are aggressively powered up.
Right.
But tea contains L-theanine, an amino acid that promotes relaxation without drowsiness. Tea is a dimmer switch.
I love that analogy. A dimmer switch.
It is a much gentler easing into the morning light. It makes perfect sense that the tea drinker's favorite morning activity is literally just sitting, drinking tea, and watching the sunrise.
They are carefully pacing their nervous system.
Exactly.
We also get a fascinating glimpse into their ideal versus reality when it comes to this fuel. The 7 a.m. riser mentions that their absolute favorite breakfast food is pancakes.
But they explicitly say they do not eat them every day.
Right. Because pancakes represent a massive investment of time. They are viewed as a time-consuming luxury.
Like a sensory experience rather than a daily staple for survival.
Exactly. For the everyday routine, utility wins out over luxury. But notice that despite their vastly different menus and macronutrient profiles, both agree on one ironclad rule.
Skipping breakfast is an absolute rarity.
Yes. They almost never do it. Why? Because, as one of them states plainly, it gives them vital energy.
Are we sure breakfast is purely about calories, though?
What do you mean?
I mean, is it just functional energy or is it a psychological anchor? The source emphasizes a crucial social element that completely changes the context of this meal.
The family breakfast.
Yes. Both individuals mention eating with their families and actually preferring it to eating alone. The 6 a.m. riser says family breakfast, quote, feels special.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it goes far beyond what is in their cups or on their plates. They specifically mention that during this breakfast time, they talk about their plans. They discuss what everyone is doing. This transforms a simple meal into a crucial morning alignment meeting.
They are essentially getting everyone on the same page before they scatter out into the world.
Exactly. By sharing that meal and discussing the schedule, they elevate the routine from mere caloric survival to a moment of genuine connection and tactical preparation.
They're grounding themselves socially before they face the professional demands of the day.
Yes.
So the body is awake, the brain is fueled, the social connections are secured, the internal environment is completely managed. Now the shields have to go up.
Moving from internal to external.
Exactly. The next phase of their morning is entirely about how these individuals curate their external environment and organize their minds before they actually walk out the front door.
This is the defensive phase of the morning routine. This is where we see them actively protecting the quiet that they both love so much.
They are incredibly intentional, almost ruthless, about how they interact with the outside world.
Take their phones, for instance.
Oh, this is huge. Think about your own phone right now, sitting on your nightstand or in your pocket. Are you someone who just checks the weather? Or are you letting 50 unread emails hijack your brain before your feet have even fully hit the floor?
That happens to so many people.
It really does. But when asked if they check their phone, the 6 a.m. riser says sometimes, specifically noting they only look at messages and the weather.
Right.
And the 7 a.m. riser says yes, they check it, but only for a few minutes. They explicitly state they do not want to spend too much time on their phone.
They're keeping that digital interaction incredibly brief to avoid a massive dopamine disruption.
Because a smartphone is a portal to the demands, anxieties, and emergencies of other people.
Exactly. By refusing to scroll social media or dive into work emails, they are preventing the outside world from dictating their internal emotional state.
That's such a good way to put it.
Instead of letting the world rush in through a screen, they heavily curate their physical, sensory space. The 7 a.m. riser opens the window in the morning specifically for the fresh air.
They describe it as feeling wonderful.
It's sensory grounding.
It is. And then there's the soundtrack to their mornings. They both actively utilize music, but again, they make contrasting choices that serve their specific neurobiological needs.
Right.
The 6 a.m. riser listens to happy music because it gives them energy. They are using auditory stimulation to pump themselves up.
While the 7 a.m. riser listens to soft and relaxing music to maintain that peaceful vibe, to kind of prolong the calm before the storm.
Yeah, totally.
We also see physical movement being deployed, not just for fitness, but as a curation tool. The 6 a.m. riser takes a 20-minute short walk.
Oh, right.
And notice what they are observing during this walk. They specifically mention seeing people walking, people jogging, people walking their dogs.
Dogs need exercise too, as they joke in the source.
Exactly. They aren't doing high-intensity interval training in a basement gym. They are gently observing the world waking up around them.
It's physical activation, yes, but it is primarily mental pacing.
They are watching their neighborhood come alive at a manageable analog speed, which helps calibrate their own internal rhythm.
That makes total sense. And this deliberate pacing extends to how they organize their minds before leaving. They talk about checking their schedules, they make to-do lists.
The tasks for the day.
Right, because, as they say, planning helps the day go smoothly. But wait, let me push back on this.
Okay, go for it.
They both claim to love the calm of the morning. They both go out of their way to avoid the stress of their phones, but then they immediately sit down to look at their schedules and make to-do lists of all their chores and tasks.
Yeah.
Isn't that just manually introducing stress into the very quiet they're trying to protect?
It seems counterintuitive, I know, but cognitive psychology would argue the exact opposite.
Really?
Yes. Trying to hold a mental list of everything you need to accomplish today requires a massive amount of working memory. It generates background anxiety.
Oh, so just keeping it all in your head is the stressful part.
Exactly. By writing down a to-do list or reviewing a physical schedule, you are engaging in cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloader.
Yes. You are taking the stressful, abstract demands of the day and trapping them on a piece of paper. This raises an important question about the absolute necessity of boundaries in our daily lives. Making lists isn't introducing stress, it's building a fence around it.
So what does this all mean? When I look at all these highly specific behaviors, the strictly limited phone time, the fresh air, the carefully selected music, the cognitive offloading of the to-do lists, it poses a really interesting philosophical question.
Which is,
Are we consuming the morning, or is the morning consuming us?
wow.
Right, when you grab your phone and immediately doom scroll, the morning is consuming you. The chaos is hijacking your brain. But what these two are doing, limiting the digital noise, choosing simple media, is a deliberate act of
It
self-defense.
really is. One of them mentions reading news articles, but the other actively prefers reading simple stories.
Yeah, these aren't just random hobbies to pass the time before work. They're defense mechanisms used to maintain the specific preference both speakers heavily emphasize. They prefer calm mornings over busy mornings.
Because calm mornings help them feel relaxed.
Yeah.
And they desperately need that relaxation because the clock is ticking.
The ticking clock.
Yeah, this entire elaborate system has a strict expiration date. The 6 a.m. riser has to get ready and leave the house around 8 o'clock, which they admit makes the end of their routine sound a little bit busy.
And the 7 a.m. riser leaves at 8:30.
Right.
They both lament that morning time goes very fast. One of them explicitly wishes mornings were longer.
Which is the ultimate tragic irony of the morning routine. You painstakingly create this beautiful, peaceful, biologically optimized, protected bubble, but you do it knowing it will inevitably pop.
You are doing all of this physical and psychological work precisely so that when 8 o'clock or 8:30 hits, you can step out the front door into the noise and friction of the world without losing your balance. It really brings us to the core of what makes a morning successful. At the very end of the source material, both individuals synthesize what a perfect morning actually looks like for them.
Right. For the 6 a.m. riser, it's highly structured and practical. Good weather, a good breakfast, and simply having enough time.
While for the 7 a.m. riser, it's entirely sensory and atmospheric. A cup of tea, a quiet room, and a beautiful sunrise.
But when you combine those two visions, you get the ultimate blueprint for an ideal start to the human day.
Which is what?
It isn't about rushing. It's about gradual, deliberate activation. It is physical activation forcing the cellular shock of the water, claiming the territory by making the bed, feeling the fresh air from the open window.
And mindful fueling. The sustained protein of the eggs, the immediate energy of the fruit, the gentle easing of the tea, the tactical alignment of the family conversation.
Yes, and finally, it is mental boundary setting, the cognitive offloading of the to-do lists, the strict limitations on phone checking, the consumption of simple stories instead of anxiety-inducing feeds.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn this directly over to you, listening right now. I challenge you to look at your tomorrow. Think about that alarm going off in the dark.
The crossroad.
Exactly. Which single element from the routines we've unpacked today could you adopt to reclaim just a little bit of tactical peace in your own morning?
Maybe it's drinking that immediate glass of cold water to naturally spark the sympathetic nervous system instead of hitting snooze.
Or could it be putting a strict 5-minute stopwatch on checking your phone so your dopamine receptors aren't immediately hijacked by the chaos of other people's demands?
Or maybe it's just opening a window for some sensory grounding before the heavy lifting of the day begins.
Small neurologically intentional shifts like those don't just change your morning, they fundamentally alter the biological and emotional trajectory of the next 12 hours of your life.
They absolutely do.
But before we go, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over on your own today.
Okay, what is it?
If our morning routines, as we've seen in the source, are so heavily structured around this idea of preparing for the day, checking the schedule, reviewing the to-do list, having that family alignment meeting to discuss plans, fueling the body for work, what would a genuinely perfect morning routine look like on a day where you have absolutely nothing planned?
Oh, wow.
If the schedule is completely blank, does your routine exist merely to serve your schedule, or does it exist to serve you?